welcome everyone to tonight's meeting of the Urban Planning Delegated Committee. Before we commence the meeting, I request that all mobile phones are turned off or switched to silent. Thank you. I will start. My name is Councillor Nick Stavrou and I chair this committee. And I will start by introducing my fellow councillors. Seated to my left at the horseshoe table in the council chamber are Councillor Jim Park, Councillor Cynthia Watson, Councillor Felicity Sinfield, who is also our Mayor, Councillor Wes Galt, Councillor Di Gillies. On the opposite side, we have Councillor Lisa Hollingsworth, who is also the Deputy Mayor, Councillor Gary Thompson, Councillor Jane Addis, Councillor Susan Biggar, and Councillor Victor Franco. I also acknowledge our Director of Urban Living, Mr. Scott Walker, to my right, and our Acting Manager of Governance and Legal, Ms. Kirsten Ritchie, to my left. There are other officers in attendance tonight, and they will be introduced as they present their reports. The Urban Planning Delegated Committee meeting is being live streamed on Council YouTube to enable public viewing of the proceedings. The meeting has also been recorded and will be made available on the Council YouTube as soon as practicable after the meeting. The primary purpose of the Urban Planning Delegated Committee is to deal with issues under the Planning and Environment Act and the Building Act. This committee has delegated authority to make decisions on behalf of Council, and for those present this evening, when we come to the agenda item, it'll be introduced by an officer, and I will then call you one by one to come forward and address the committee. If you're making a submission, please present your viewpoints clearly and concisely on why you support or oppose the planning application. Please do not repeat what earlier speakers have said, and keep the submission focused on relevant issues and points not previously raised. If you're opposed to the planning application, please tell the committee why you disagree and suggest an alternative approach that would satisfy your concerns. Please focus on your concerns rather than matters of history or detail in the officer's report. There's a strict limit of 3 minutes for each speaker, including councillors, and while as chair I can vary the time, I will seldom do. For those in the gallery this evening, welcome again, but I would like to take this opportunity to remind you to extend due courtesy and respect to each other and to the committee as a whole. This includes remaining quiet while others are addressing the meeting and not disrupting any of the decision-making processes of the committee. Thank you very much. Mrs. Ritchie, are there any apologies for this evening?
Thank you, and through you, Chair, there are no apologies for tonight's meeting.
Thank you, Mrs. Ritchie. We move then to the adoption and confirmation of the minutes. Councillors, can I please have a motion to adopt and confirm the minutes of the Urban Planning Delegated Committee meeting held on 1st of May 2023? Councillor Hollingsworth.
As circulated, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hollingsworth. Followed by Councillor Gillies.
Seconded, thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Gillies. Councillors, is anybody opposed? There be no opposition. I put the motion to the vote. Motion is carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. Declaration of conflict of interest of any councillor or council officer. Councillors and council officers, are there any conflicts of interest that need to be declared tonight? There be no conflicts of interest. We'll move straight to the main part of our meeting. Item number 3, presentation of officer reports. We start with item 3.1, Boroondara Housing Strategy Draft, consideration for public consultation. Ms. Jessica Donaldson will be presenting the report. Ms. Donaldson, please proceed.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening. The current Boroondara Housing Strategy was adopted in December 2015 and has provided the overarching framework for the provision of housing in Boroondara. The current housing strategy is due for review and revision to bring it in line with current data projections, coinciding with the release of new Australian Bureau of Statistics data from Census 2021 and housing needs and aspirations. An updated Boroondara housing strategy has been drafted for public consultation. The housing strategy's purposes are to understand and define what the current and emerging population trends and associated housing needs are for Boroondara, and to identify strategic policy directions and actions to meet these needs. Understanding the population and household trends and characteristics of Boroondara provides an important insight into our housing needs and how these might change in the future. Over the next 15 years, Boroondara's population is forecast to grow by around 28,700 additional residents and 9,400 additional dwellings. Council has an important role as the planning authority to plan for its current and future communities' housing needs. There are other key challenges and needs that influence housing in Burundara that have been considered and responded to in the draft housing strategy, such as protecting our heritage and character, sustainability, design excellence, housing diversity and choice, housing capacity, an ageing population, housing affordability, social and affordable housing, homelessness, and infrastructure capacity. The draft housing strategy is a strategic framework that guides different types of housing to appropriate locations, providing diverse housing choices for current and future residents. The strategy sets out key population and household characteristics, housing change patterns and locations, and housing capacity analysis findings. It identifies 3 strategic directions to articulate Burundara's approach to responding to our unique context. These are housing diversity in appropriate locations, housing that is sustainable and achieves design excellence, housing that meets the needs of all residents now and in the future. It also sets out actions for Council to support communities, rental providers, community housing providers, developers and the state government to work together to meet the housing needs of Burundara for now and in the future. Thank you. Open to any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Donaldson. We'll first go to speakers that have made submission. We have 2 people that have indicated they wish to make a submission on this matter. Once I've announced your name, please sit at the top of the horseshoe table, and if a submitter is not present, we will move to the next speaker. Once close to the 3-minute mark, at the 2.5-minute mark precisely, I will make this sound indicating that you have 30 seconds left. Thank you very much for that. I have Ms Mary Drost, followed by Romano Delbeato. So Mary Drost and Romano Delbeato. Ms Drost. So Ms Drost. Please commence with your name and your suburb, Ms Drost.
My name is Mary Drost, as you all know.
Do.
And I live in Camberwell, not very far away, Prospect Hill Road, corner of Waterloo Street. And actually Waterloo Street is something I wanted to talk about because I got information that number 4 Waterloo Street development seems to be going to be approved by the council.
Ms Drost, tonight, but this item is on the housing strategy. I don't mean to interrupt
I'm just
you.
introducing.
Sure.
You know, and I don't agree at all with the council. You know, when I was a councillor once, I sat where you're sitting, and we brought in heritage control over a big slab of, it was Camberwell then, not Burundara, a big slab of Camberwell, from Riversdale Road to Canterbury Road, Burke Road, all the way back. And in those years, it's a long time since I was a councillor here, and it was Camberwell. And in those years, almost nothing has changed. Drive around there. Wonderful Edwardian Victorian houses, hardly changed. You know, I live in the corner of Waterloo and Prospect Hill Road, the White House with the tower, you know, very visible. And it's going to stay that way, you know, forever. And and you know, have you been in Paris? Been in Paris? I'm sure a lot of you have been in Paris. I spent a lot of time in Paris, and you don't dare change anything there. You'll be sent straight to the guillotine. And we've got to protect heritage, and I think we're not doing it very well at the moment. And I see here you talk about over the next 15 years, Burundara population is forecast to increase by around 28,000. Well, let them live somewhere else. Don't have to build, you know, big flats and big houses for them. I think you've got to really look after the heritage areas of the area. You're responsible for it. And it'd be a very sad thing to see it being ruined.
Thank you, Ms.
Time's up?
You have 30 seconds.
And I know the population's growing, but they can go somewhere else. They don't have to come to Camberwell or Boroondara. And so this housing strategy, please don't put more and more development in, bigger and bigger development. At least keep the heritage areas as heritage.
Thank you,
I'm
Ms.
sure
Ross.
you understand what I mean.
Yeah. There'll be no
Time's
questions?
up?
Yes, time's
I
up.
could say a lot more,
unfortunately.
but I'll stop.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that. There'll be no questions. Please return to the gallery. I appreciate your presentation tonight. Mr. Romano Del Beato. Thank you. Start by your name and suburb, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, my name's Romano Del Beato. I lived in View Street, Hawthorn for 50 years. I make a following statement in front of put the following in front of the committee on behalf of myself and Jane Nathan, who was Mayor, of course, of Hawthorn in 1991. It's as follows. The centre of Hawthorn is from Glenferrie Road, Glenferrie Oval, traversing Glenferrie Road, taking in the Glenferrie Hotel in Burwood Road, the Arts Centre, and back past the Lido to Barker's Road and through Swinburne. And it's great spaces like the Rocket Park that has two fringe community houses, two community houses on its fringes. These are truly great people's places with the continuous movement of pedestrians east to west and north to south. No other strip shopping centre in the region has such a diversity of uses, and the potential is still untapped. It is professionally and passionately argued that the proposed rezoning is premature. The community expects this council to develop cohesive plans that include...
Del Beato, I'm sort of have difficulty following you. Which topic are you speaking on?
The rezoning of the car park known as Serpils Car Park.
This is not the item that we're dealing with right now. We're dealing with the housing strategy, item 3.1.
I'm sorry, you called me.
I apologise for that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry.
I'll get two goes then.
I do apologise. You'll get a chance later. Sorry for that. There was a mix-up in the order, but we recover pretty quickly. We move on to the councillors for questions for the officers. Or officer response first, and then if there are none, we'll move to councillor questions. There are none. Councillor questions. Thank you. Do we have any questions for the officers? Councillor Addis.
Are we right for questions now? The officers had no reply?
Yeah, the officers don't have anything to respond to.
Thank you very much. My question relates to the projected growth figures, which I totally recognise are assumptions, and the projected number of houses that are suggested will be needed, and there are a few assumptions that have been outlined about, for example, there'll be, and I am getting to a question, there'll be a greater number of single resident dwellings, but I'm assuming there must be some other assumptions to get us to that figure, because it doesn't, I can't, on what I'm reading, I can't get to that figure. So I wonder if a bit of clarity could be given around that.
Thank you, Councillor Addis. Mr Walker? Or Thank you.
Through you, Chair. Thank you. So a number of the new households will be accommodated with an existing vacant dwellings. During the 2021 census, the population in Boroondara declined and vacancy rates rose. At the 2021 census, there was 11.2% of Boroondara dwellings, which is around 8,147 dwellings, were unoccupied. It is important to note that although some of these unoccupied dwellings are available stock, many would have been only temporarily unoccupied. For example, due to the COVID-19 pandemic restrictions preventing the arrival and return of residents, including international students from overseas. The unoccupied rate in Hawthorn East was 15.9%, and in Hawthorn it was 14.8%, suggesting the lack of international students is at least part of that picture. So at the 2016 census, 9.3% of Burundara dwellings were unoccupied. A return to the higher occupancy rate is forecast, meaning that some of the forecast growth is to be absorbed by pre-existing dwellings. Thank you.
Councillor Addis, are you satisfied with that answer, or you have a follow-up?
I'm not entirely satisfied, but I think I'll leave it there. Well, look, I don't know how we can predict that unoccupied houses will become occupied, in that if it's unoccupied, there could be a good reason, couldn't there?
We respond to that?
Thank you, Chair. Through you. I don't think we can predict really the future, and they are just projections, as you indicated already. I think the key point is that in 2021, when census was taken, the vacancy rate within Burundara was historically low to what it was previously in previous years, indicating that with the lack of overseas migration and people moving away to other locations, interstate and so forth, that actually less dwellings were occupied than would normally be the case because of the particular circumstances at the time. So the projections estimate that that vacancy rate is going to reduce over the next few years, and it probably already has to some extent by now, and it will only continue to do so. So it is, and a lot of that cohort will be people that are looking to move into housing that was previously occupied already as well. And while we can't predict whether that's exactly 2,000 dwellings or 2,300 dwellings, that's where the methodology that the demographers use in estimating the population growth and the dwelling growth comes from. There is an assumption that some of that growth will be accommodated within existing housing because it is already on the market and is there. It's not all of the existing housing that's currently or was vacant in 2021 will be occupied. There'll remain some housing that will not be used and continue not to be used because there might be second residences for people, for occupiers, but some of that component will be taken up by that housing. And that's built into those projections, and that's why there's this perceived discrepancy between the number of residents to be projected, additional residents, the average household size, and the number of dwellings. That's why they don't quite match up. And if you look at the percentages, that makes up for that shortfall.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, Councillor Addis, for your question. Councillor Gold.
Thank you, Chair. Overall, I thought it was an excellent strategy report, and my two questions are more of a detailed nature. On page 23, we refer to the neighbourhood character precinct statements, and these are obviously seen as fairly powerful tools to direct development into areas where council would prepare strategically to see that development take place. My question is on this one is, when a developer is looking at purchasing land or considering purchasing plots of land, will this neighbourhood character precinct statement be clearly available to them at that time? Because there will be no requirement to show that on any title particulars for the land.
Mr. Donaldson? Thank you.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. Thanks for the question. Those policies, those background documents and what used to be reference documents are clearly referenced in Council's local heritage policy, and they're also referenced in the relevant zoning provisions of that zone. So anyone doing their due diligence there'll be a requirement under Section 32 to provide a planning property report that states all the relevant policies and zones and overlays that apply in that particular location. So that information is readily available. The document itself, because it is a background document rather than an incorporated document, it will not be listed on the planning property report, but anyone doing their due diligence would have no problems finding that. And there's also a search function on Council's website to type in the address and retrieve that statement, that neighbourhood character precinct statement through the website directly.
If I may. I guess when someone's looking at purchasing land and they haven't got a property to come and chat to you about in planning terms, could we offer a service where if they were considering various options of land around Boroondara, we would be prepared to consult with those potential purchasers on this sort of matter?
Who's going to take? Please proceed.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. Any person that has an interest in purchasing land in Boroondara has the opportunity to either come to the counter and ask for that information or any relevant planning information, or they can ring either the Statutory Planning Department or Strategic Planning and ask questions around either what existing policy exists or what policy changes might be in the works at any given moment. And that's information that we can provide and have provided and continuously provide as well. We don't know who potential purchasers are unless they contact us. But obviously that's part of the service that we provide to anyone that's got an interest in purchasing land in Boroondara.
Thank you. I'm happy with that. Are you happy for me to ask one further question?
I'm happy for you to ask a further.
Thank you. A much more detailed question at this point in time. On page 25, we're talking about design excellence, and the matter of quality of construction is mentioned. Is there any intention with Council to try and improve the quality of construction? It's a very, very hard thing for us to control in any way, shape or form. It's only something we can promote for and push for. Have we any intention of doing so? Thank you.
Ms. Donaldson?
Thank you, through you, Chair. It is a challenging thing to look out for. There are sort of limited tools within the planning scheme. It's about process and education, and I think in the draft housing strategy, we sort of identified those sort of educational opportunities, potentially a series of best practice design guidelines, which would be in alignment with what's already in the planning scheme, but putting it forward in a more visual, easy to understand sort of communication way to pull those important points out. So yes, that's where we're at with that. Thank you.
My point really went to, is there any way of controlling it? I have met some developers who wouldn't give two bob for mentions in a planning document.
Councillor, is there a question?
Question is clear, that are we proposing to carry any further, are we looking at taking any steps which will give a building surveyor any further powers to inspect buildings during the construction phase?
Mr. Walker?
Thanks, Chair. Happy to answer that. The way that the building legislation is set up enables private building surveyors to be appointed to undertake the building inspections. So Council has no direct control over the building surveyors undertaking those inspections and the inspection regime which is set by the state government and the particular items that are inspected. There is no quality inspection component to what a building surveyor does in terms of the broader higher quality of construction relative to the building code standards.
My question went to advocacy for such legislation to be changed. I know it's a long, hard road. Have we any intention to do that in the future, do you believe?
Again, through yourself, Chair, we are actually have a range of advocacy items relating to building reform. And they do go to the overall approach to the building system that is in place and the standard of outcomes that are achieved through the current building system and the risks that are created. So that will go some way towards the quality of outcomes associated with that advocacy.
Thanks, Councillor Goldfuss, for the response. Mr Walker. Councillor Park. Oh, apologies. Councillors, there are no questions. There'll be no questions. I just have one final question, just sort of relating to Councillor Addis's question. Are there any uncertainties around those growth figures that you've had in there from the demography? Is it an upper range, a lower range, or a mid-range?
Thank you, to you. I'm not a demographer, but the projections that are being produced are not produced on a range. There are certain assumptions that sit behind that are based on past trends, past development approvals that are in the system, to make some evidence-based assumptions around how population will, and dwelling numbers and households will increase over a certain limited period of time. Is there some uncertainty? They're mathematical projected numbers, and they don't predict the future, and it might be that we have a little bit less than 9,400 dwellings or a little bit more over that period of time. But ID Consulting, who do the demography and the projections for council and for a lot of councils, have a lot of experience, and they've proven to be quite accurate in their projections in the past.
Thank you for your response. Thanks for that. There'll be no further questions, councillors. Is anybody prepared to move a motion? Councillor Addis?
Thank you very much, Chair. There is a potential alternative motion that should be up there. Oh, no, that's not it. It's sought to include some of the explanation that was given. It was basically, is it somewhere up there or not there? Maybe I'll
Let me seek some guidance, Councillor Addis, and I'll come back to you. Thank you for that.
Otherwise, I can just read it out. Thank you. Thank you very much. That is what I'm seeking to move as an alternative motion.
Thank you, Councillor Addis. What I'll do is I'll test for a seconder, and if we have a seconder, Councillor Park. Have a seconder. Thank you for that. We have a seconder, so we'll get your motion up on the board. And to assist the mover, do we have any opposition to the motion once you have some time to read it? Would you like me to read it, or you can read it if you wish?
Either way, look, maybe. So it basically is number 1, endorse the draft Borondara housing strategy for the purpose of public consultation, subject to inclusion of additional information explaining the assumptions underpinning the dwelling and population increase in the population and household projections section of the housing strategy. And then number 2 just changes the dates slightly to allow a day or so for those minor changes to occur. And then number 3 remains the same, that we're essentially going to bring this back after consultation.
Thank you, Councillor Addis. Just to move to the next step, are we, anybody opposed to this motion? There being no opposition, Councillor Addis is the mover. Do you wish to speak to your motion?
Yes, look, I'm aware that other people may want to say something because it is an important document, and I very much support the amount of work and the very thoughtful analysis of the current situation and the projected needs for housing in Borondara, and the breadth of ways that have been suggested to meet that demand. The reason why I sought this was because with the information that was provided up front, and I fully acknowledge that there are many assumptions, and they are just that, they're assumptions, and so we can't really know what any of the figures are. We can only make our very best guess, which is what I believe the officers had done. But with the upfront figures provided, if you did a sort of a back-of-envelope calculation, it didn't quite match with the projected growth and the projected number of dwellings. And by adding this, I think it provides the background understanding to the reasons why the numbers have been suggested as they are. And I think the important thing is that this is actually an opportunity for what is a very good report to go out to the community and for us to hear back about their thoughts and to hear any insights they have about the report. So I certainly do support it, but just with this little bit of extra detail. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Addis, for your thoughts. Councillor Park, being the second, do you wish to speak now? Reserve your right. As Councillor Addis alluded, there's no opposition, but I'm happy to afford any councillor that wishes to speak the chance to speak. Councillor Gold.
I might just pick up a point made earlier by a presenter, that we don't randomly predict the numbers that flow into Boroondara. We all know the state governments see growth throughout Victoria, and they're very much focused on the middle ring suburbs to take a lot of that growth. So pressure will be brought to bear on this municipality to allow more dwellings, and we will be pushed to do so. I see this document, if it all goes through, as providing us with some very excellent tools to control where that development takes place. So that's very important in maintaining what we have and love dearly and still allowing for some development. So I'm very supportive of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gold. Councillor Hollingsworth.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Thank Councillor Addis and Councillor Park for putting the inclusion into the motion. Just to provide some additional clarity there, but I'm very happy with the officer's recommendation, and I concur with the prior comments that this is an excellent report. It's giving our community a 4-week period to participate in consultation, and I think we all understand and accept that as we evolve as a society and a community, that there is going to be an increased need for housing and use of our service and service delivery, and I very much acknowledge too that the pre-COVID figures are probably a better estimate in the sense that that was where population growth was heading. Yes, we've had delays because of COVID, but I now see as we're coming to terms with COVID recovery that population increase is on the rise, and I very much support and endorse this going to consultation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hollingsworth. Councillor Franco.
Thank you. I'll keep it brief. I just want to say I think it's a very significant body of work. It's very impressive. It sets out very eloquently and clearly the policy context and future scenarios and a projected way forward with recommendations. I very much look forward to the feedback we get. It's a very comprehensive report. 4 weeks isn't long, but I think it's a really worthwhile body of work. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Franco. There'll be no further councillors wishing to speak. I'll go back to the mover. Councillor Addis, do you wish to add anything else to what's been said?
No, thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Addis. I now put the motion. All those in favour? Motion's carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. Thank you, officers also. The next item on the agenda is item 3.2, 2B Warburton Road, Camberwell, Telecommunications Facility. And this report will be presented by Mr. Richardson. Mr. Richardson, please proceed.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. I present item number 3.2 for planning permit application PP220279, which seeks the use and development of the land for the purpose of a telecommunications facility for the land at 2B Warburton Road, Camberwell. The subject site is zoned within the Transport Zone Schedule 1 and not affected by any overlays. Details of the proposal include the construction of a new 30-metre high monopole mobile phone base station telecommunications facility, installation of 12 Optus and Vodafone panel antennas mounted on a head frame of the monopole, installation of 3 VicTrack panel antennas, provision of 27 remote radio units, decommissioning of the existing 30-metre high concrete monopole, installation of 6 outdoor bay units inside the compound area, and installation of ancillary equipment. The application was advertised in August 2022 with notices sent to owners and occupiers of adjoining land. A total of 34 objections have been received to the proposal. The objections predominantly relate to the following concerns: the impact on heritage places and values, the level of visibility from parkland and residential properties, the impact on surrounding parkland and vegetation, environmental impacts, and the impacts on health and residents and visitors to the adjoining parkland. A thorough assessment of the proposal has been undertaken against the Burundara planning scheme, as outlined in the planning assessment report. The proposal for the telecommunications facility will provide an upgrade to local telecommunications infrastructure, whilst minimising impacts on vegetation, the character and heritage of the surrounding area, and amenity impacts to nearby residential areas. The new telecommunications facility will replace existing infrastructure currently located nearby and will be located on a subject site containing a large range of existing infrastructure, including 2 train lines, a train station, a railway depot, power lines and an electricity substation. Given the immediate area already contains extensive service infrastructure and that the particular location of the new telecommunications facility will have separation from sensitive residential properties, the location of the new telecommunications facility is considered appropriate. The visibility of the facility will be minimised due to its location within parkland that forms a vegetated corridor that has a high level of vegetation and canopy tree cover. The topography of the area will also assist in reducing the prominence and visibility of the proposed monopole and associated infrastructure. It is recommended that Council issue a notice of decision to grant a planning permit, subject to the conditions detailed in the report. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Richardson. Tonight we have 2 speakers on this item. First, Mr. Greg Price, followed by Mr. Clinton Northey. Mr. Price, could you approach the horseshoe table? Remind you that we have 3 minutes, and at the 2.5-minute mark, I will be ringing the bell. Could you please start with your name and suburb?
Thanks. Good evening, Chair and Councillors. I'm Greg Price from Dent Street in Glen Iris. I found this report interesting. I guess everyone's addicted to their mobile services, and there's obviously a need for it. A couple of clarifying things. First of all, the report really focused on the height of the new tower and didn't really discuss much, unless you studied the detail, how large the new antenna panels are and the visual bulk. And I guess from a visual perspective, the real issue is it's not the height or the width of the tower, it's actually the amount of equipment on there. That said, Decommissioning, so I work for a Silicon Valley technology firm. Decommissioning is typically a term used for no longer using some piece of equipment. I would like some clarification whether decommissioning includes the removal of the existing tower, so we don't end up with 2 towers in the area. The area happens to be an old stomping ground of mine. And essentially, can we have a permit condition to ensure the removal of the old tower? My second point is the 8-foot fence going around the facility. It's next to a train line. Most of the other mobile phone facilities I've seen around don't have large fences around them, and so it'd be interesting to know why there's a need for that, given that the site is adjacent to a walking path. So essentially, although it's on the between the park and the train line, it's like, do we need basically a large intrusive fence? And the other thing is, as far as the cabinets are there, can we have a condition to have them camouflaged or painted so they don't become graffitied, or they just don't stand out because they're bright, shiny stainless steel things, so much the same way the traffic light control boxes tend to be painted these days. So they are my suggestions and questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Price. Are there any questions for Mr. Price? Councillor Park.
Mr. Price, I'm just wondering how this application affects you. Do you live in the neighbourhood, or is there some connection with the matter?
So I used to traverse between the train line and school every day when I was young, and I still basically go up to that area, to the Burundara Park there, and wander around there. And it's so it's, and I'm concerned for the visual impact on it. Like, I understand that we need the tower, and I'm not objecting to that, but it's just a matter of, can we minimise the impact overall? But I use that area because it's adjacent to the park and my familiar surrounds from when I was young.
So you don't live in that neighbourhood, though?
I don't live in that neighbourhood, but I still go there.
Thank you.
Because it's essentially where I live is an extension of that whole trail that goes up along the Alamein line and around on the old outer circle train line. So hence I ride my bike up through there, and I walk up through there, and so forth.
Councillor Park, you have your answer. Thank you, Mr. Price. There'll be no other questions. You may return to the gallery. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
The next presenter is Mr. Clinton Northey. Could you please approach the bench, the horseshoe table? Thank you, Mr. Northey. Please, with your name and suburb.
Hi, my name's Clinton Northey. I'm from Point Cook, I live in Roland Drive, Point Cook, and I'm here on behalf of Venture, the applicant for the facility. I'd just like to start off with, firstly, thanks for allowing me to speak. The proposal's overall purpose was in conjunction with the Victorian Rail infrastructure owner VicTrack to establish the now decommissioned existing telecommunications monopole and to be repositioned within the rail corridor with a new facility that could house VicTrack Communications radio equipment and to jointly share with Optus and Vodafone, a mobile phone base station. The existing monopole was deemed to not be structurally adequate to support the proposed equipment by both the new carriers. This is critical infrastructure to support the rail network communication needs, but also to provide telephony customers mobile and in-home access to internet for personal use, for work or for business. This is now more than ever important in a day of flexible working arrangements. The facility will also provide the essential emergency communications to those customers when life and property is under threat. Importantly, the following should be considered in determining the proposal alongside the obvious coverage benefits. The proposal avoids the proliferation of towers in the area by combining not only Optus and Vodafone equipment, but also VicTrack Communications, only 23 metres from the existing facility. The proposal also complies with the Burundara planning scheme, and the proposal will replace an existing VicTrack facility currently on site and is appropriately located on a rail corridor where similar infrastructure currently exists, including overhead electrical lines associated with the railways. The grouping together of infrastructure therefore makes sense, which has been noted within the delegate report. As the planning delegate report suggests, the planning office has recommended the issuing of a notice of decision to grant a planning permit. As applicant, we fully support the recommendation and seek council's full support of the application. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Northey. I have Councillor Gillies.
A question for the presenter, please, Chair. Are you able to help with clarifying if decommissioning the existing pole includes removal of it?
It does.
Thank you.
That's the intent, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. There be no further questions. You may return to the gallery in your seat. Thank you very much. We now return to the officers for any matters arising.
Through you, Mr. Chair, just to answer some of the questions that have arisen. Council's assessment notes that the location of the proposed monopole, the existing vegetation corridor along the railway line, and the topography of the surrounding land of the location of the proposed monopole reduces the overall bulk and size of the proposed infrastructure. In regards to screening, it may be possible to screen the equipment further, but ultimately it would depend on the requirements of the operators and the standards that they need to meet. In our view, screening is not necessary given the context being a service and utility area. Whether the equipment could be screened, for example, through painting of that infrastructure, may be a question better served for the applicant.
Thank you, Mr. Richardson. Councillors, are there any questions for the officers? Councillor Hollingswood, followed by Councillor Gillies.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Ritson, with screening, has vegetation been considered? A very thin, tree or shrub or bush as opposed to a more of a denser material screening? And the reason I ask is obviously concerns with graffiti if there is a solid material screening as opposed to vegetation.
Mr. Richardson, will you take the question?
Through you, Mr. Chair. In terms of planting, the officer's recommendation has included a condition for a minimum of 5 native trees capable of reaching a minimum height of 15 metres to be planted on the site and maintained to the satisfaction of the responsible authority. In terms of graffiti and the possibility of graffitiing the infrastructure, as the plans show, there is a fence surrounding the infrastructure, and therefore it would only be the operator who has the ability to access within that compound area.
Look, thank you. I understand. I appreciate the condition of tree planting, but I was alluding to something closer to the containment area of where the structure is, to try and take away some of the unsightliness of a commercial industrial type look, because I appreciate this is a busy walking track along there. So I was just alluding to could more be done to help with beautification.
Mr. Walker?
Through yourself, Chair. Yep. I think the assessment that's been undertaken and the context of the facility and what's been proposed, with the additional 5 trees that are being required by the conditions, that we feel that planting regime in relation to what's proposed in the context of the location is more than adequate, and that we don't believe that additional planting is necessary in this context.
Thank you.
Councillor Gillies, followed by Councillor Addis. Thank you, Councillor Gillies.
Thank you. Just to foreshadow a motion when you're ready. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Addis.
Thanks, Chair. We heard that the applicant or the applicant's representative is planning to remove the decommissioned pole. Is that assumed that it will definitely happen, or we don't need another condition, do we? It will happen?
Mr. Walker?
Again, through yourself, Chair, yes, that's been included as part of the proposal, that the tower would be removed, so that's certainly been made clear as part of that application. We don't believe that an extra condition is necessary, but it certainly would be something that can be considered if you wish.
Thank you, Mr. Councillor Addis.
I'm comfortable if it's part of the application. Yep, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Addis. Thank you, Mr. Walker. There be no further questions. Sorry about that. Councillor Bigger.
Sorry, I just snuck in there. Just to follow up again, and I don't want to do this to death, but on Councillor Hollingsworth's point, because I think a couple of times there have been reference made to the sort of the context of this. And while there is, I do appreciate that there is a substation right there, this is, the context of it also is really parkland. It really is very much open space. So it is not like this is hidden over a warehouse area or anything. So I guess, and I appreciate there are 5 trees being planted. And so again, not to be too much of too pedantic about this, but are the trees planned to be planted between the facility and the path, or on the other side, sort of preventing it from being screened between the rail line and the facility, or between the path and what we're in the mono tower? Because I think that's the screening that's needed, because it will, in that space, it potentially really will stand out, I think.
Again, through yourself, Chair, the actual land is VicTrack land, so it's not council park land that we're referencing here and asking for a planting to be undertaken. That planting needs to be to our satisfaction, so we haven't specified the specific location of those trees, and so that's a judgment that will need to be made in consultation with the permit holder to ensure that those trees are positioned in an adequate and appropriate location, and that's yet to be finalised.
By our open space team, is that who would determine whether or not they're comfortable with its impact on the open space?
Absolutely. We would consult with them to ensure that there's appropriate planning in the right location. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Bigger. There been no further questions. Councillor Gillies, this is the time to move your motion.
Thank you, Chair. The motion is the officer's recommendation, please.
Thank you, Councillor Gillies. Is there a seconder? Councillor Addis.
Happy to second.
Thank you, Councillor Addis. To assist the mover, is anybody opposed to this? There been no opposition. Councillor Gillies, would you like to speak to your motion?
I think the matters raised have been addressed, so I just thank the officers for the work that they've put into this. Thank you, Mr. Richardson and Cohen and Director Walter. Thank you very much. I just put the motion to my colleagues.
Thank you, Councillor Gillies. Councillor Addis, do you wish to add anything?
No, thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that. Now let me put the motion. All those in favour? Motion's carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors, and thank you, the officers as well. The Next item on the agenda, item 3.3, Serpils Lane Car Park Rezoning, Amendment C385 Borough, consideration of panel report. Mr. Brennan will be presenting this report. Mr. Brennan, please proceed.
Thank you, Chair, and through you. This report provides a summary of the independent planning panel hearing held to consider submissions made on Amendment C385. This amendment proposes to rezone the land at 399 Burwood Road, Hawthorn, which is also known as the Serpils Lane Car Park, from Public Use Zone 6 to Commercial 1 zone. This amendment process is one part of the Serpils Lane Strategic Property Project, which includes the rezoning and the sale of the site. Amendment C385 was authorised on the 17th of August 2022. A formal exhibition was carried out from the 22nd of September to the 24th of October 2022. Council received a total of 38 submissions at the end of the exhibition period and continues to receive submissions, and a total of 67 submissions have now been received. On the 5th of December 2023, the UPDC resolved to refer all submissions received to an independent planning panel for consideration. 2 late submissions were received following the directions hearing, but before the full panel hearing. Officers forwarded these submissions to the panel for consideration. However, on the release of the panel's report, these submissions have not been listed in the report as being included in the panel's considerations. Officers have contacted Planning Panels Victoria to determine whether these submissions were received or considered, but have not yet received confirmation from the panel. There have also been 5 further submissions received since the panel hearing concluded. These late submissions have raised issues including the adequacy of notice, objections to the sale of the land, objections to future development of the land, and objections to the loss of car parking. These matters were all raised through earlier submissions and were included in earlier considerations by the UPDC and the panel. Officers are not recommending any changes to the amendment to respond to these late submissions. The planning panel hearing was held on the 27th and the 28th of February in 2023. The panel's report and recommendations were received by Council on the 14th of April 2023. The panel concluded that the amendment is consistent with the strategic intent as detailed in the Glenferrie Structure Plan, and that the Commercial 1 zone is the most appropriate zone for the site. The panel also supported Council's submission that any future redevelopment of the land is a separate matter, best assessed through a future planning permit application process. The panel recommends that Amendment C385 be adopted as exhibited without any changes. Officers are proposing a revised recommendation to that published in the agenda. This revision makes clear that a decision on the amendment will not be made until Council makes a formal decision to sell the land. This is to ensure that Council is not caught in a position of resolving to carry out the rezoning and then resolving to not sell the land, in which case the rezoning would no longer be necessary or appropriate. On that basis, officers recommend that the UPDC resolve to receive and note the panel's report and recommendations and to forward Amendment C385 to a future meeting of Council to be adopted. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brennan. 8 people have indicated to wish to speak to the submission. 7 are against the recommendation and 1 is supporting the recommendation. Once I've announced your name, please come to the top of the horseshoe table. And I will start by Ms. Montserrat Pesimenti, followed by Mr. Leon Pesimenti. All speakers have 3 minutes. At the 2.5-minute mark, I will make the sound. Please proceed with your name and suburb.
Yep. My name is Montserrat Pesimenti. I live in Hawthorn and I have lived there 50 years, 52. Okay, thank you for the privilege of letting me present to you all a few points in relation to the proposed Serpils Lane Car Park rezoning as presented to you after Planning Panel's Victoria decision. I have to congratulate the Council's Planning Department for the speed and timely use of all the resources at their disposal in order to process this unnecessary rezoning of an asset that was better left as public land and in the custody of the Council. New legislation relating to a rezoning tax will be effective in Victoria from the 1st of July 2023, and I suppose that was an incentive. The Council should keep the land at Serpils Lane, discontinue the notion of a sale, The area is non-controversial and easy to access for the residents, traders and visitors. Plus the council is only the keeper administrator of that land, part of it paid by the traders in the safekeeping, or as said by Maddox in July 2022 report, is a public purpose trust of the council for the use of visitors, customers, and for the benefit of business. Council officers, in all the reports, and I have been to all the meetings to do with Serpils Lane, keep mentioning in their reports the publicity given to the process of the rezoning. Myself and many of my contacts were not being made aware of the process via any letter drop or any other way. The council website or the Age, we do not keep constant watch of it. I do now, just in case things happen. Will it be possible for the officers to provide me with a letter or a notice, anything that was circulated to the affected parties? I really would love that. I found, anyhow. As a resident, I urge the councillors not to resign, and I am waiting for the president of the traders, but his delay. As the secretary of the Traders Association, I don't know what we're going to do with less 89 car spaces, plus the other 90 that are going to be taken off Glenferrie Road for the tram stops and the bike lanes. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms.
And
President.
we'll see you at the council meeting for the looks of it.
Councillors, are there any questions for Mrs. Pesamenti? Councillor Franco.
Thank you, Montserrat. Are you speaking on behalf of the traders or as a resident? I just wasn't clear.
Both. I feel very strongly as a resident because I live very close to that area, but as the traders secretary, I also feel very strongly, and I think is a great loss of a valuable resource.
And just to be clear, when you say you'd like it to remain a public asset, do you mean you want it to remain a car park as it is, or you simply want it to remain in public ownership?
I would like it to remain in public ownership, and if the car park can be rejiggled in some way, I would like that also, because it's only one level, but I don't know if you're familiar with, it's high up on the ground, so they may be able to excavate and make 2 easy levels or 3. But it's next to the railway line. It's, I think, 30 or 50 meters from Glenferrie Road, so it's accessible. I use it to just cross from the library to go to the shops. I illegally cross Burwood Road. I don't go to the lights, and I just go through there. Because I come from the library, and it's easy, and a lot of residents use it as a through road also. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
No problems.
There be no further questions. Ms. Pesamenti, you may return to your seat in the gallery. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next speaker is Mr. Leon Pesamenti, followed by Mr. Julian Burnside. Mr. Pesamenti, begin with your name and suburb.
My name's Leon Pesamenti. I've got a business in Glenferrie Road, and I've been here for a long time as well. And by the way, I'd like to thank all the councillors for the work they do. I understand that it's virtually volunteer, and so, yeah, I'd like to thank you guys for doing what you're doing, right? I'm going to be saying the same thing as the previous speaker, more or less. I mean, the traders in 1968 decided to create a levy to buy some land to
access the car park. There's a story there why they had to do that. Originally, it was accessed from Glenferrie Road. When the railway line came through, that street became too narrow, so they had to have another access from Burwood Road. Now, if the traders in 1968 thought it was important to have a car park, they spent their own money to purchase 399 Burwood Road. I would think that it's even more important today in the number of cars that exist. The benefits are enormous there. The cars spill out to Burwood Road, not Glenferrie Road. The car park is next to the station, which is normal. You normally have a car park next to the station. I don't know why you guys are wanting to sell this place. I just don't know. If you need money, is there some other way you can get a loan or something? Because we don't sell our assets as a community. You build on them, but you don't sell them. What are you going to do in 10 years' time? What are you going to sell then? You're going to sell the town hall? I don't know. I don't know what... Yeah. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Mr. Pesimenti. Councillors, any questions? There don't appear to be any. You may return to your seat in the gallery.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Burnside. Please start with your name and suburb, Mr. Burnside.
Yeah, my name is Julian Burnside. I live in Hawthorn, and I should say I've lived within 1 kilometre of Glenferrie Road almost all my life. Like Leon Pesimenti, I want to congratulate the committee on the report they've prepared, but I disagree with the result. I think the rezoning, although I gather it's too late to rezone it now, the rezoning should not be accepted and the sale should not be affirmed. No sale should be affirmed. And the reason I say that is this. The council will have to decide whether it wants to be remembered in history for making a lot of money on a sale of land or for helping revise the area. And the benefits to this area of access to a car park adjacent to the station, close to walking distance to Glenferrie Road, are enormous. It's a really important area. I noticed that the report mentions that there is a need for additional car parking, and retaining the present car park makes a lot of sense. There is an alternative way of using it, and that is to spend a bit of money, maybe the money raised from charging for parking there, raise a bit of money and extend the car park one layer down and one layer up. And the higher layer could be used for public dining. The way they've got outside the town hall in Hawthorn, hopeless, absolutely hopeless, but it's a nice idea. But the way they've done it is hopeless. Sorry, councillors, but I disagree with the way it's done. It seems to me that the Glenferrie Place plan calls for additional car parking, and so getting rid of car parking is nonsensical. It doesn't make any sense. One of the earlier versions of the committee's plan is that the car parking could be adjacent to the Hawthorn Arts Centre, which is across Burwood Road. That would not work. The fact that this car park is really close to the railway station is very important, And the fact that the railway station is so close to Glenferrie Road is equally important. So I would urge the council to vote against the very, very fine report.
Thank you, Mr. Burnside. You've finished right on time. Councillor Hollingsworth appears to have a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Burnside, thank you for your presentation. I just didn't hear when you said outdoor dining didn't work. What area were you referring to?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear your question properly.
You said something didn't work. Were you talking about Beswick Square dining or?
The dining area outside the Hawthorn Town Hall is hopeless, in my opinion. Something similar should be done and could be done if the car park were moved to a two-layer car park.
Right. Yeah, I understand.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think, yeah, you're referring to obviously the open space in Beswick
Yes.
Square. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Hollingsworth. Councillor Franco.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Burnside, why do you think it's so important for car parking to be provided adjacent to the station? And is it because people often commute with cars and take trains, and you think that the car parking should be provided adjacent to the station?
I think that a lot of people, the fact that it's close to the station is very important, because a lot of people will drive to the station. And Glenferrie Station is a really important station, mainly because Swinburne is there. I've lived in that area for, well, most of my life. I live at the top end of Delegated Street now, slightly closer to Auburn Station than to Glenferrie Station, but I prefer to walk to Glenferrie Station because all the trains stop there because of Swinburne. And can I add, just as a by the way, the fact that Swinburne is there has really improved Glenferrie Road. It's really come along marvellously. Now, Glenferrie Road is a fantastic area, especially between Burwood Road and Barkers Road. I use it a lot. I go there a lot. And I think that if more people came to it by train, it would be a marvellous thing. But if people want to go there and park and get the train to wherever they're going, that's understandable. And I gather from the earlier version of the committee's report that I read that it is thought that the car parking is mostly staff and students who go to Swinburne. Now, if it's students, that is inconsistent with my recollection of the way students are, because most of them turn up for as long as is needed for their lessons and then disappear. But if it's staff, then I think one possibility would be for the maybe Swinburne to negotiate with the people who own the Wakefield Road parking centre, so that people who can produce proof that they are a member of staff of Swinburne could get a day's car parking for not $10, but say $8.
Thank you, Mr. Burnside. I think we have the answer to the question that Councillor Franco asked. I don't mean to interrupt you, but I think we've had that answer. Councillor Franco, are you comfortable with that?
Yes, I'm comfortable. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Franco. Sure. There being no further questions, thank you for your presentation.
I have one. Yep.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Parker.
I'm a bit intrigued because so often a particular political party urges us to encourage people to use public transport, and that area is reasonably well served by Burundara standards, at least, by public transport. So I'm puzzled that you seem to be placing a fair bit of value on car parking. It seems to be at odds with what I'd have expected. I just wonder if you could expand on that a bit.
I think car parking is important if the station is going to be used. If the station is going to be used a lot, then people need to be able to park their car there and not turn up to a parking area that's full. Okay? That's why I think it's worth doing a deal with the people who run the commercial car park in Wakefield Street, so that the daily car parking, I mean, parking has been there free of charge for as long as I've known it.
And you see it as a council responsibility to provide commuter car parking?
The car parking is there, and as larger tram stations, tram stops come in, yes.
Very well.
Thank you, Councillor Park. There be no further questions. Mr. Burnside, please return to your seat in the gallery. Thank you. The next speaker is Mr. Matthew Fail, followed by Mr. Peter Davey. Mr. Fail. Thank you, Mr. Fail. You have 3 minutes. Could you proceed with your name and suburb?
Thank you. Hi, my name's Matthew Fail. I'm in Hawthorn. I wanted to speak this evening because I feel passionately about this particular issue. I live around the corner from the car park. You know, I walk past it every day. I see how full it is, especially since COVID's ended. And I know I have friends and family that regularly visit the area and who frequent the car park and use it. And I just feel that it's a valuable community asset that council already owns. You know, it could be, you know, obviously, you know, it's been recently, there's been paid parking recently, meters been recently added, so it's going to generate income. Thinking about it, you know, on the whole, you know, some of the other arguments, you know, and I won't labour the point because some of the other speakers have already made this point, I think, but I think the site could be redeveloped to utilise it further for parking because it's, you know, it's got a great proximity to the station, as Mr. Burnside just pointed out. No, I don't think it's council's responsibility to provide commuter car parking. But that said, the car park has been there for a very, very long time, and I think it has been adopted as such. And I think that removing such a valuable asset and allowing it to be developed, I think is, you know, it just would be a travesty, I think, and I, you know, would wholeheartedly urge the council to reconsider the rezoning. The other point I would make is there seems to be a lot made in some of the reports I've read of the fact that there is a potential option that the site will not be sold. Yet there has been an inordinate amount of time invested into rezoning it or considering rezoning it, and countless amounts of, you know, of funds, taxpayers' funds, invested into a rezoning that may, you know, for a sale that may never happen. You know, it's mentioned about 3 times in the documents I've read, and I just think that, you know, it just seems to be, you know, there seems to be some inconsistencies. You know, obviously the strategic plan is clear that the way forward is to sell the land. So I don't see why, you know, why there's continued sort of mention, I guess, of the fact that the council could opt to not sell it. Obviously, that would be my preference as a community member, but it just seems that there's, you know, there's some inconsistencies in the way the documents have been, you know, authored or prepared, in my view. But in general, I think I would, restate my case. I urge the council to reconsider. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fell. You finished well within time. Any Councillor Bigger?
Thank you. Just a quick question then, just to clarify. Is your main objection or concern the loss of car parking, or is it the potential sale of public land? Or both?
I would have to say it's both, but I think for me as a, you know, I'll be honest, I don't drive, but I have many, like I say, I have many friends and family who visit me regularly in the area who use the car park. Lynch Street, there's no parking there, so they've got to find somewhere to park when I go to dinner or something. So I think for me, I think it's really just, you know, it's about that, right? And that and the train station for me, because, you know, I see so many people that commute daily that use the car park. You know, I go past it daily and I see people parking there, so.
So it's the car park. Great, thank you very much.
There being no further questions, you may return to your seat. Thank you, Mr. Fail. The next speaker is Peter Davey, followed by Mr. Frank Babagallo. Thank you. You may start with your name and suburb.
Hello, thanks for having me back again. Peter Davey, I currently live in Doncaster, but in 3 weeks' time I'll be moving to Hawthorn in Golding Street. I'm here with my wife, she's not speaking, but we are very much against rezoning this. It doesn't need to be rezoned, it should remain as a car park. And I want to point out that the traffic survey upon which this is based is utterly and completely inadequate. To go there on 2 occasions just during the day and resolve that the car park is solely used by Swinburne Uni is ridiculous. I've been there this year 3 times on Saturday night and the car park is full. I've been to 3 unis. I never went to uni on Saturday night. Last Wednesday, the car park was absolutely full. There was no parking. There was no parking on Glenferrie Road and no parking in the car park adjacent to the swimming pool. So people are using it to go to the area and visit the businesses and frequent the local Glenferrie area, which, as Matthew said, has really come alive. And I think Mr Bernstein said that the impact of the university has created that vibrant atmosphere. Second point, page 52 in the strategic document that was submitted says that consultation and communication, owners and occupiers of affected properties will be notified as part of the statutory planning scheme amendment process and will be given the opportunity to lodge submission to the proposed rezoning and sale of the land process. This did not happen. So the people in the arcade building got nothing, the developer got nothing. We've spoken to people in Barrett Apartments and they got nothing. We only found it because we were walking down Burwood Road to go to one of the pubs for dinner, and we saw a notice on the door which made us stop in our tracks. So to say that this would happen and then not do it is completely incomprehensible to me, and I've worked in public sector roles for quite a long time and I know the importance of consultation. The third and final point I'd like to make, and I was very interested in the conversation earlier between Councillor Galt and one of the council officers around if you're a pre-purchasing person, you should contact council to seek any action that is happening in that property, in that space that you are buying into. Well, this is exactly what I did in June 2021. And I contacted the council as I was looking to invest in the arcade building, to ask if anything was happening on this piece of land at the back. To be told, that's council property, there's nothing happening there. That was June 2021. In the council's strategic planning document on page 57, it talks about legal advice from Maddox in 2019 in relation to the car park, and that should be considered as far as the sale of the property is concerned. So there was advice to the council in 2019 from Maddox. I contacted the council, as was discussed earlier in item 3.1 tonight, to say that that's a good idea to do, and was told nothing is happening, it's council land.
Thank you,
So
Mr.
I
Davey.
then
Your time has expired.
I cancelled my deposit and I paid the deposit. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Davey? Councillor Franco.
Thank you, Chair. Just in relation to your first point, I think it was, so your concern is the provision of short-stay car parking to support the local business community. But if that's the case, couldn't that car parking be anywhere in the proximity of the zone rather than specifically right there in the current form of an open-air car park?
That's true, Councillor. Yes, it could be anywhere. But you have a car park right there, only 50 metres away from the local properties. I really like the idea of removing car parking off Glenferrie Road. And that's going to be an amazing place, and I still look forward to living there. But if you're removing that and then you're actually getting rid of a car park that is not seen from any of the main roads, but actually gets access from Burwood Road, so it actually gets traffic off of Glenferrie Road, I cannot see the sense in doing that when you can, as other people have said, you could make that a 2 or 3 level car park and make a lot of money. And I want to commend the councillors. Last time I was here, you made the decision, which was not recommended by the council officers, you made the decision to put the paid parking on the car park, which was very good because you see the value of that asset. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Davey. There have been no further questions. You may return to your seat.
Thank you.
The next speaker is Mr. Frank Barbagallo, followed by Anthony Stolbra.
Good evening, Chair. Thank you, Mayor, councillors, Councillor Gillies. Thank you for replying to my email.
Start with your name and suburb, sir.
Yes,
Thank you.
Dr. Frank Barbagallo. I live in Studley Ward off Barkers Road. That's your ward, councillor.
Would you take a seat,
Sit
please?
down, certainly. I run a business in Auburn Road, which is Junction Road, Junction Ward. As a local family, have 3 teenage children. On public transport, we frequently visit Glenferrie Road Precinct. We frequently visit the Serpils Lane car park as a safe drop-off pick-up zone for our children at all hours of the day. It's very well lit, gives us comfort to drop them at the train station where we can safely accommodate that transfer, as opposed to the Glenferrie Road entrance, which is chaos 7 days a week. I want to express my concern as a user of the car park and the open space that it provides for local amenity, but I also want to express some concern about the public exhibition, as Officer Brennan explained to us, which concluded last year. I'm very disappointed as a triple ratepayer that the public exhibition was what I would call to be by stealth, by being buried on the website. I do note that we love to read the bulletin every month. It's probably your most expensive communication channel to residents and ratepayers. On this current issue, there's have your say on Mailing Road public consultation, but nowhere in this bulletin that I read over the last 3 years anything about have your say on Serpils Lane. However, I did find this lovely emotive essay advocating the sale of this public resource, which was published in September 2022, but it was very emotive. It's advocating the sale, and it's buried on the website. It's 4 clicks deep. We do not scrutinise the website looking for public interest advisories. We read the journal that we pay for as ratepayers, and I find it categorically upsetting that something of community interest such as this, asset sale, rezoning, I mean, for what other purpose would there be rezoning if not to realise the asset? And it's not publicly communicated. I've spoken to multitudes of patients that I see every week, and that's only been in the last 4 weeks, which is when I discovered this, through a flyer no bigger than an A4 sheet on a shop front in Glenferrie Road. That's how I found out. And I must say, as a professional person and triple ratepayer, I am outraged that the council does not insist that these sort of determinations are not publicised through the preferred channel. It's letterbox dropped to every resident in this municipality. So I'm pretty disappointed about this, public exhibition, formal exhibition period by stealth, and then to read this trite, emotive essay advocating the sell-off. That's disgusting. I don't know if any of you have read this, but you've got a great copywriter versed in the art of persuasive text and advertising. I'm disgusted to read this on your website. That's all I'd like to say.
Thank you, Mr. Babagallo.
Thank you.
You've finished right on time. I appreciate that. Councillors, are there any questions for Dr. Babagallo? There being no questions, you may return to the gallery in your seat. Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening.
Mr. Anthony Stolbrick, followed by Mr. Romano Delberto. Please start with your name and suburb, sir.
Sure. Tony Stolarek. Stolarek is a Polish name. Carpenter is what it really means. So
Thank you for that.
Tony Carpenter. I'm a Hawthorne resident. I live at 9 Vickers Street in Hawthorne. I actually, in the rush to come here, printed out what I thought was my submission in 4 pages to help the councillors, and I realise I printed out the wrong version, so with a couple of bloopers in it. But I think my 4 pages of handout will assist the councillors as we're walking through it. I wanted to highlight that Glenferrie and Hawthorne, as the council strategy plan identified, has a cruciform activity area, north, south, east, west. And at page 1 of what I handed out to you, as you know, we have Glenferrie Road running north-south, but we also have the wonderful system of laneways that run north-south from just near Barker's Road all the way down to the library, so that people can walk through the car park system, through the laneway system, all the way down to the library. And this was identified in the Glenferrie, in the strategy plan for the area, and indeed in the Glenferrie Place plan. And it was referred to in the planning panel decision process. So page 1 identifies the cruciform. Page 2, and these diagrams, I've given you page references in your agenda. You can actually find the cruciform at page 135 if you want to open, but also at page 142 of the agenda that you have before you is a wonderful dotted line walk map that shows you traffic flows north to south, not on Glenferrie Road, but the way pedestrians walk. The term is called grace paths that we use when people walk through Hyde Park in London or in New York. And Serples Lane is right in the middle of the grace path there. Serples Lane is a connector from the Hawthorn Library through the Hawthorn Town Hall, which is now the Hawthorn Arts Centre, through Swinburne, into the retail centre, into the train station, and into the area north of the area. In fact, I live at the top of that arrowhead, right at the top of that diagram. Now, what's important is that the planning panel, the PPV, when considering the appeal, and I at that stage did a submission for the Glenferrie Traders Association, I'm appearing here today in my own right, the planning panel decided in the end that the Hawthorn Council did have the ability to rezone the property, but it did state at page 146, this is page 3 of the handout I've got for you, that the council consideration should proceed subject to addressing the more specific issues raised in submissions as discussed in the following chapters. One of those that the planning panel didn't consider was the ownership issue, the Maddox, the Glenferrie Traders, the constructive trust issue. And I note with interest that the agenda materials before the UPDC today doesn't mention that at all. As well, in terms of future development, there's a lot of material which I have at page 3 where the PPV noted that there are a lot of planning issues that need to be considered in some detail. Now, I'm surprised...
I'm afraid you're out of time.
Okay, final comment. I'm just surprised that the revised officer recommendation with respect to members of the UPDC, item 3 is an authorisation for someone to make administrative changes. Who knows what that means? It would appear after the matter is considered by council. I really do question councillors and members of the UPDC whether you would really want to pass to the council a matter as undeveloped and as requiring of further work as the current state of this proposal. I think it needs more work before it can go to council, and I urge you to allow and instruct the officers of the council to undertake the further work. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Torek, and I apologise for mispronouncing your name. Councillor, is there any questions? No, there'll be no questions. Thank you. We have our final speaker for this evening, Mr. Romano Delbeato. Welcome back, Mr. Delbeato.
Thank you. Look, a lot of what I was going to say has already been said. I'll just emphasise a couple of points. A lot of you councillors are not from the Glenferrie area don't frequent the Glenferrie area so much. But it's very clear that the Serples car park area is really virtually the focus of a lot of community activity, commercial activity, and a lot of traffic, foot traffic. It's the centre of life of Hawthorn and the Glenferrie district. And that's why we feel so strongly about it. It's not currently the way it is, if you look at it. It's not a very glamorous looking area. And we were in fact told by council officers at previous meetings that basically it was a remnant of various previous developments and subdivisions and whatever. And in its duty to be financially efficient, the council woke up to this area that was kind of a remnant and said, oh, what are we going to do with this? Well, it doesn't seem to have anything in it. We'll get rid of it. We'll sell it and make some money. And who knows, we could have some high-rise building there or something else once we sell it. That is essentially, I mean, several speakers before me mentioned that they are a bit in the dark, they don't understand why things are happening, and it's true. This has not been carried on very well. As I say, at no stage, I'm speaking here from these notes that were made by myself and Jane Nathan. At no stage in community planning was it suggested that Serpils Lane car park be rezoned. It does not appear, it does not explicitly appear in any strategic planning. Yet it is a pivotal parcel with access to Berwick Road and Glenferrie Road Station and the shops. That's why people are saying we don't understand how this all started and came about. It is a major pedestrian pathway to Swinburne, from Swinburne to Glenferrie Road, that hasn't really been developed, although the Glenferrie Traders Association has put forward a design to enhance the area, both as a car park and as a public space. So the role of the council is to develop and implement integrated plans for the future well-being of our community. We therefore respectfully ask the councillors to put people and placemaking before the financial imperatives. And by the financial imperatives, I mean the rush to rezone to save some money before the state tax comes in.
Thank you, Mr. Delvato.
Thank you.
Are there any questions?
Yes, I have a question,
Councillor
Chair.
Park, thank you.
You attribute to council officers all manner of things there, including that it just happened to be that they stumbled across this and said, let's make some money. Which council officers were responsible for making those comments, and where and when?
I don't know their names, but it is written down. It is written in one of your documents.
Do you have that document with you?
No, I can find it for you though.
I'd love to see it.
Yeah, it says basically that it is the council, in its efforts to be financially efficient and prudent, has found that this piece of land would best be in the best interest of the council and its efforts to be efficient.
Well, with due respect, you're not reading a document, so
no,
let's
but that
not.
is the substance of it, believe me.
Thank you, Mr. Delvato. Been no further questions. You may return to your seat.
Thank you.
We will now return to the officers for matters arising.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you. It's noted that a number of speakers and submitters are opposed to the loss of the car parking, and a number of speakers and submitters are opposed to the sale of the land. That's not the matter that's before the UPDC tonight to consider. It is the report that has come in from the panel, which states that the rezoning of the land is strategically supported by the Glenferrie Structure Plan and is an appropriate zone for the site going forward. If council does resolve to sell the land, it is required that it be rezoned from a public use zone. So this is something that needs to be done before council can consider selling that land, which is the reason it's being done in the order that it is being done. There were also a number of questions around the exhibition of this planning scheme amendment. Officers wrote around 800 letters to property owners and occupiers in the area that were sent to a reasonably broad area, as well as interest groups in the area. That is in accordance with council's statutory requirements for exhibiting a planning scheme amendment. I'll also note that there's been further consultation undertaken in this area around the Glenferrie Place Plan, of which this is an element. There's been consultation ongoing around the place plan, which looks at the council's plans for the broader area of the Glenferrie Centre. And also there was a matter raised around item 3 or point 3 of the recommendation. That's a reasonably standard point in recommendations put to the UPDC. The purpose of that is to allow the Director of Urban Living to authorise minor changes that do not change the intent of the amendment. Essentially, if there are spelling errors or text changes required to the amendment to satisfy the department or the Minister for Planning that don't need to come back to the UPDC for a new resolution, it enables the Director to authorise those changes. That is the intent of that third dot point. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brennan. Councillors, are there any questions for the officers? Councillor Hollingsworth, followed by Councillor Galt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Brennan, just wanted to seek a point of clarification with the exhibition process. When you mentioned that so many letters were circulated, would that typically be a letterbox drop organised by a council officers, or would it be through Australia Post?
Through you, Mr. Chair. The letters are sent via Australia Post.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hollingsworth. The next, Councillor Galt, followed by Councillor Franco.
Thank you, Chair. I'd first like to foreshadow a motion, but then put two questions of clarification. Is it fair to say that the motion, that is the recommendation that is before us on the screen, was not available? There was a lot of people presenting tonight. Is it fair to say that recommendation was not available to them until partway through the discussion on this item?
Through you, Chair. Yes, it was made public when it was published on the screen.
Thank you. And therefore, moving to the last line of clause 2, it talks about a decision confirming the sale of the land. Can we clarify to those presenting tonight and those listening that we do not have a sales proposal to put at this point in time, and should it be considered, it would be the subject of further public consultation and council meetings?
Through yourself, Chair, I can confirm that this matter this evening is dealing with the zoning of the land, the planning scheme amendment that relates to the zoning of the land. It does not have any relationship to a decision to sell the land. That's a separate matter for council that will run its own separate processes.
And it will go back to public consultation and council meetings?
If it gets to that point, there will be further decisions of the council in relation to the sale. So there'll be further public information in relation to that sale.
Thank you.
Councillor Franco, followed by Councillor Biggar.
Thank you. I've got a couple of questions, Chair. I'll start with the simple one. We heard some discussion about the current use of the car park as a commuter facility for people using the station. I'd just like some advice in relation to the parking studies that have been done and the use of the land. To what extent is it actually used as a commuter car park for people outbound on trains, or as opposed to people coming in and driving to access the university and, in a sense, therefore undermining the use of public transport?
Through you, Chair. So the primary purpose of the car park being provided by council is for visitors to the centre and to support the smaller traders who are unable to provide their own on-site car parking. The traffic surveys that have been carried out by council have shown that during normal business hours, the predominant users of the car park appear to be students and staff of Swinburne University. So the predominant users are not users of the are not commuters. Given the 2 to 3 hour time limit on parking in the site, it would not be suitable for commuters into the city for long visits. Is also a factor to consider in that.
Thank you. My other question relates to the revised officer recommendation, in particular, the new addition of the second sentence of point 2 of recommendation number 2, which reads, a decision on whether to adopt will be made following a formal decision confirming the sale of the land. What I'd like to know, two questions in relation to this. First, what does that mean? Is that intended to mean a formal decision after the land has been sold or after a decision has been taken by council to go to market? And does council need to take a decision to go to market before that happens?
Mr Walker.
Thanks, Chair. Just to clarify what's happening here, there's a strategic property project that has concurrent processes in relation to this site. One of those is the amendment to rezone the land, which you're considering this evening. The other will be future decisions of this council in relation to whether it is proceeding with the sale of the land. And that's the point that is being referenced here. That will be an appropriate point to consider the adoption of this amendment, is at that point that we know that the council is definitely selling the land. It's not at a point when the land has been sold. It's not after the land has been transferred. It is actually prior to that. It's when there is a concrete decision in this council saying that it will be proceeding with the sale.
Mr Franco?
Yeah, and just to be clear, because proceeding with the sale does not necessarily mean then that an actual sale will necessarily take place. Like any property owner, we sometimes may choose to...
Form that into a question.
Does it mean, thank you, Chair, I'll try and be clearer, it's intended to mean at that point, if and when council decides to go out to the market to get offers, let's say, at that point, then a formal decision will be made.
Through yourself, Chair, that's correct. And this is really about enabling certainty for all parties in moving forward when you have concurrent processes. And it would be prudent to proceed, adopt the rezoning and proceed with the rezoning and have that being finalised by the Minister for Planning whilst Council is then moving ahead with its steps to finalise or proceed with the sale of the land. So the intention here is to be efficient in terms of timing and certain for all parties involved in any property sale transaction.
Another question, do we really need that sentence in there? I mean, if the motion 2 without that sentence enables that, it doesn't preclude that from occurring, does it?
I might just pause you there for 1 second because Mr Storer has his lights on. Maybe he has a clarifying comment.
Thank you, Mr Chair. I was in fact going to address the earlier question being asked by Councillor Franco because I'm not quite sure the answer to the question responded to exactly what you said. The scenario is that council must first of all decide whether it wishes to sell the site, to dispose of the site. That's the very first question. Council has not made that decision. The second thing is that having made that decision, if that's in fact the case, council will need to either enter into a private treaty arrangement or to go to the open market as part of a sale process, following which council is still in a position to decide whether or not to proceed with the sale. So there are multiple points, decision points, as to what will happen with this site. I just think it's important to be clear about that. The second aspect is that the process of determining to sell the land will involve input from the community, so there will be consultation about that decision, and you will have feedback from the community as to its thoughts about that proposition. So I just want to be very clear about the steps involved here.
Thank you, Mr Storer. Councillor Franco?
Thank you. That clarifies the question that I was asking. I suppose that the next question is, do we really need that second sentence in there? Does it add any value? I suppose it provides more clarity, but that's still feasible without that sentence being added, is it not? And
Mr Walker, do you want to respond to that?
I'm happy to respond to that, and through yourself, Chair. Strictly speaking, that is correct. The second sentence is not necessary because the referring of the matter to council does not indicate a timeframe in which it moves from a UPDC meeting to council. However, usual practice in amendment-type matters is that when a report is put forward to a UPDC, they will generally move quite quickly to an available council meeting in the near term. So it provides a point of clarification, but is not strictly required.
Councillor Franco, you comfortable with that? Councillor Biggar.
Yep, I also have a few questions. So, and this is the first one, I suppose, is a clarification again of what Councillor Franco said. So would you say that what is preventing us from basically postponing this decision right now until we made a decision, were we to make a decision to sell, is a matter of timing, in your view, Mr. Walker, meaning that you think there are two separate processes, effectively, that this one would potentially hold up the other were we to decide to go ahead and sell?
Mr Walker?
Thanks. Through yourself, Chair, that's correct. It is a matter of timing. The two processes are separate processes. So the amendment process and the sale of land process are separate processes, but they do have a relationship with each other. And timing of each step in relation to those concurrent processes is important.
Yeah. So then just to go to the point about the amendment then, one of the speakers with the handout talked about for the panel, the last point of the panel, concluding that the amendment should proceed subject to addressing the more specific issues raised in submissions, as discussed. Will there be an opportunity? There won't be an opportunity then to address those issues raised because we're making a decision about the amendment right now. Do officers have any concerns about those?
Again, through yourself, Chair, the panel is quite clear in distinguishing which matters are subject to a future process or separate process in relation to the sale of the land, and that is the matters that are being referred to there. So that will be a separate matter for you to consider in the sale process. It's not matters to consider relative to the rezoning. The panel is quite clear in its recommendation to the council about the zoning of the land, that it is a suitable and appropriate zoning, and that is what its recommendation focuses on.
I see. So you're saying that it should proceed subject to addressing the more specific issues which relate to the sale.
Yep, and they are matters that are separate matters that the council will need to turn its mind to.
Thank you. Sorry, can I keep going?
Proceed.
Can you confirm that this isn't something I don't think we've talked specifically about, but can you confirm that should the rezoning go ahead and we decide not to sell the car park and we want to keep it as a car park, is there any issue with it being rezoned and still maintaining it as a car park as it is?
Mr Walker.
Through yourself, Chair, in a pure sense, the land could be rezoned to Commercial 1 zone and be retained by the council as a car park. There are two issues with that. One is that there is a potential liability which will fall upon council under the windfall gains tax, which becomes effective from 1st of July, which would be an issue, a financial issue for the council to consider and have regard to, because if the council does not sell the land, there is no point at all in realising a windfall gains tax liability, and that can't be undone once it's been instigated. The second is that the land would be now within a zone which would be inconsistent with the retention of the land for public purposes under car parking for local government. If that is the intention of the council over the long term, to retain it for that purpose, the zoning would be inconsistent with that. It's not unlawful, it's just inconsistent and not in line with the ministerial guidelines.
Okay, so which is why keeping this the suggestion that we only adopt it really is that it makes, meaning that were we to choose still down the track to not sell this, then it does make sense to then not proceed with the, this recommendation ultimately. Is that correct?
To yourself, Chair, that's correct, because once it's adopted, it can't be unadopted.
Yep.
So if it's adopted and put forward to the Minister for finalisation in terms of a rezoning, it can't be retracted and brought back. So that's why the timing is important.
Okay. And final two. It's just to Mr. Storer's comment, I just wanted to confirm then, because I believe this is what you said, that any decision about a sale would involve a public consultation, public element. Okay, thank you. I was writing at the time, so I missed that, sorry. And then my final question is just, if it's correct that, that we didn't ever put anything in the Burundara Bulletin about the sale of the Surplus Lane car park, can I ask why that was?
We never do.
Mr. Brennan?
Through you, Mr. Chair. The lead-in time to get items published in the Bulletin is a matter of months in order to proceed with amendments and meet with ministerial timelines. So there are, Council has a certain number of days after receiving authorisation with which we must commence exhibition of an amendment, and that doesn't work with publication timelines for the Bulletin. So generally with amendments, we don't go through the Bulletin, we go through direct mail to affected property owners and occupiers.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Vicker. And next is Councillor Thompson.
Thanks. Through you, Chair. There's a lot of discussion on whether we're selling this and the subject to that sale, the rezoning of the land. With that taken note, items 2 and 3, are they administratively required, or could the motion simply finish at item 1? And therefore, any future decision's a future decision?
Through you, Mr. Chair. That could happen. We could receive. You could resolve to receive the panel's report and do nothing further. However, there would then need to be another meeting of the UPDC to refer it to the council for adoption.
Which would ordinarily, that's just could happen anyway, because we would have resolved at that time to sell.
Yes.
I'd put that to whoever might want to move it if that's the intent.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Councillor Park.
Such a process would cause extra delays, obviously. How long would that be, in officer's opinion?
Mr. Brennan. Councillor Park's question.
Sorry.
That's all right.
Through you, Mr. Chair. The other consideration is we would need to seek an exemption from the ministerial direction timelines for the time to adopt the amendment. The fact that council had made a decision to refer it to council but tied it to the sale of the land would be justification to the Minister for Planning that we are considering the amendment, but there is another matter that justifies holding off on that final decision.
Okay, so that's the administrative thing. Yep, okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Park.
Well, I've asked my question.
Yeah. Do you want, for the benefit of myself, I think your question was that that would introduce delays. Is that the question? And
Yeah,
procedural issues?
What would be the extent of delays if we took that approach?
Yeah.
Through you, Mr. Chair, it would effectively be, depending on the timing of the Urban Planning Delegated Committee to the council meeting, it's generally around 6 weeks between those two to get a report following a decision to take it further. So it would be another, essentially 6 weeks.
Councillor Park?
Yep. I'd be interested to hear an officer response to the suggestions that were put by a submitter about stumbling across this and shaking the tree for a few extra shekels. I may have not conveyed that entirely verbatim. And I'm also interested to understand when council last publicised a proposed rezoning in the bulletin, if ever.
Thank you. Mr. Merriman?
Okay, yeah. Through you, Mr. Chair. To my recollection, we haven't done formal exhibition of an amendment through the bulletin ever.
Mr. Walker?
Thanks, and through yourself, Chair. There was quite a detailed and considered report put to council mid-last year in relation to this site as a strategic property project and set the context of development in and around this location, including across this site, from the original Glenferrie structure plan and what the future development expectations were for this area, including potential redevelopment of this site. And so that set the strategic context for what may happen for development on this particular site, and then set forward a path for consultation and consideration of this as a strategic property project and its different elements, including sales steps and processes, investigations around the site, consultation, and the planning scheme amendment component. So it's been quite explicit and avert right from the start what the intentions are behind the project for the community, and that's been included in the relevant information within the website and other notifications as part of the planning scheme amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. Councillor Park, you comfortable with that? There being no further questions, Councillor Galt, now will be the time for you to move your motion.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to propose the officer's recommendations with one amendment in clause 2. I'm discerning some concern over the word confirming in the last line of clause 2, and the suggestion is to remove the word confirming and put in to proceed with. So a formal decision to proceed with the sale of the land. So remove confirming and to proceed with. That would be the motion I'd propose to move tonight.
Councillor Park?
Happy to second that, although I'd prefer to proceed with a sale of the land, so it's clear there's no, yeah. So I'll second that on that basis.
We've got a seconder. So, councillors, to assist the mover, is there any opposition to this motion?
Maybe.
Does that? I don't have a maybe.
I'm a maybe because of the second sentence of clause 2. I wonder whether the mover may consider deleting the second sentence entirely.
Councillor Gold.
My preference would be to leave it in, to be absolutely clear that we're ordering a process rather than, and a lot of people have mentioned tonight that they weren't fully aware that things were going on. I think the inclusion of that second sentence makes it very clear that there's a potential process and this is the order it will take place in.
Councillor Sinfield, are you now a yes?
No, I think I'm a no, but probably on an island on my own, and so I might speak in opposition to it.
All right, then. We have some opposition then. Thank you for that, Councillor Sinfield. So, Councillor Gold, as the mover, do you wish to speak to your motion?
I do, Chair. Thanks very much. We were made aware quite some time, well, everyone knows for quite some time that we've had a car park sitting in Serpils Lane with something like nearly 90 spaces. And we were advised that it was not used well by residents and traders and was majority used by Swinburne. It was a valuable piece of land and we didn't charge and we don't police the parking there very much. So it seemed likely when we were looking, and also at that time, it was said that potentially if we built a better located car park, we would, in the design of that car park, make up for any shortfall that might be lost in getting rid of this land. So it seems sensible, I think, to council at that time that we move through a process. But we were driven in that by the challenge of a windfall tax that was likely to occur this year. And regardless of considering a sale any further, it seems sensible to move that at this time. But since that is now not before us, I'm seeing this motion as purely a procedural motion, just to send this report, panel report, up to council to finalise this stage of the process. No further action is proposed at this point in time, and I would look to my fellow councillors to propose to support this tonight and simply move it to the next stage and then shelve it until we do anything else. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gold. Councillor Park, do you wish to reserve your right? Or do you... Thank you. Now, other councillors wish to speak or comment? Councillor Sinfield.
Thank you. I'll speak just briefly. My only opposition to this is based on the existence of the second sentence of Clause 2, as I mentioned before, because I feel that it alludes to the forthcoming sale or the likely forthcoming sale of the parcel of land. I'm not comfortable with selling the land, and council hasn't resolved to do that yet. While I think there's probably likely to be majority support to do that, I'm not in support of the divestment. So I'm comfortable with the officer's revised recommendation in essence to take these steps to receive and acknowledge the panel report and so forth, and to not proceed with the to the rezoning, but I just don't think that it's prudent to fly that flag at this point. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Sinfield. Next, I have Councillor Biggar, followed by Councillor Franco.
Yep, thank you. I have, I suppose, similar reservations to Councillor Sinfield, and in fact, actually probably like Councillor Thompson's idea of leaving it as accepting, receiving and acknowledging the panel's report, because that seems to me to be the most important thing that we're doing right now. And I do also have concerns, because it does, even though I think we've had good responses from officers tonight, and we've sort of teased out the issues for those who are listening, I think we don't want it to feel like this is something that is predetermined when it's not. And that is a concern for me, the way it reads. It's better than what it was, but it still reads that way. So I'm still slightly undecided on where I'll land on this, and I appreciate that it might be, again, in the minority. But I would just, I think that this is, as we've heard tonight, and we've only, we've heard snippets of what I think Councillor Galt and I have been hearing over some months from people who are concerned about the sale of, both those who are concerned about the sale of public land and those who are concerned about the sale of the car park. We are not doing either of those tonight, but I do appreciate the concern and the sentiment, and I just think we need to tread carefully and ensure that whatever does happen, there is the opportunity for really clear and fair public consultation, so that people do feel heard. So I'm a bit line ball right now on what is on the screen.
Thank you, Councillor Biggar. Councillor Franco.
Thank you. I support the motion that's up on the screen. I think, based on the advice we've received, it's an improvement to the original officer recommendation. I think the further amendment that Councillor Gold has put up is, and Councillor Park clarifies things even more, and I am very supportive of that. Just in relation to some of the other comments on the maintenance and sale of public assets, of course it's incumbent, it's not a decision for this matter, but I just want to make the point that we do have a duty to consider the assets that we have and whether we're using them in the most appropriate way and form. And separately, in terms of this site, a vision as to whether what's there is in the long term benefit projecting out 20, 30, 40, 50 years onto this site is what is there currently the most useful and practical and beneficial outcome for the broader community. Separately to that, I think there is a recognition, and it's been made clear by the traders, about the need to provide some short stay parking that we provide it in an effective and efficient way to prop up the local business community. But that's a separate issue to, say, commuter car parking. It's a separate issue to, free parking. We don't do that anymore for students and that sort of activity. And I don't think those sort of activities are the sort that we should necessarily be supporting. And there's also some useful comments about pedestrian corridors through sites, and I think they're things that we always should keep in mind. Anyway, they're asides, but thank you. I'll support that amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Franco. Councillor Thompson.
Thanks, Chair. Look, I support the motion. There's nothing in the motion that says that we've decided to sell. We don't know who we're selling to. We haven't even started that process, so there's nothing offensive in here. As I say, I could have lived without items 2 and 3, but for the purposes of clarity, I think this is fine.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Councillor Gillies.
Thank you, Chair. Just to reiterate, I will be supporting this motion on the basis of it's prudent, and the timing is important with these things. Parallel processes can be complicated, but this is not a commitment to sell.
Thank you, Councillor Gillies. Councillor Park, do you wish to exercise? Yeah. Thank you. Councillor Gold, just reverting back to you, do you wish to make any other comments?
I'd just like to thank my colleagues for the comments tonight, but I wouldn't support removal of Clause 2 or even the last sentence of Clause 2 because I think it takes away from the intent of the motion. It is an intent simply to accept and not to rezone, and by removing that sentence or that clause, it does not make it clear that we're not proposing to rezone at this time. I think it's important to keep it in. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gold. With all that, I will put the motion to my colleagues. Those in favour? Those against? The motion is carried with 10 to 1. Actually, sorry, I forgot to vote. In all this excitement, I'm for it. So 10 to 1. Thank you, councillors. Thank you for the debate. Thank you for the officers for the work that you did, and also answering a lot of difficult questions tonight. Appreciate your hard work. So the next item on the agenda is general business. Councillors, are there any matters of general business? There be none. Moving to urgent business. No urgent business. Well, we have come to the end of the meeting, but before we close the meeting, I do want to thank all of you who joined us this evening, and I declare the Urban Planning Delegated Committee meeting closed at 8:45.